Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast of Math Unleashed. Math is machine learning, artificial intelligence technology hub established by Department of Science and Technology in collaboration with T-Hub, the world's largest innovation hub. Today, we are honored to have Anu Acharya, the visionary CEO of Mapmygenome India. Under her leadership, Mapmygenome is transforming healthcare using genomics, data analytics, and AI to empower individuals with actionable genetic insights. Her company has received various prestigious accolades, including the NASSCOM Emerge 50 ET Startup Award, as well as the Pride of Telangana Award. With a vision to touch 100 million lives, Ms. Anu is revolutionizing personalized healthcare through genomics, as well as enabling disease prevention in innovative ways and revolutionizing wellness overall. Welcome to Math Podcast, Ms. Anu.
Thank you so much.
You've had an incredible journey being a founder of Mapmygenome. I think the journey has been over a decade now. So can you share a bit about your journey and some of the key milestones that have led to you to lead Mapmygenome?
Sure. So I think it didn't start with Mapmygenome, at least my genomics journey. So I graduated from IIT Kharagpur many years ago.
Okay.
And then did a couple more masters in the US and worked for a couple of companies. And then in the year 2000 was when I first started my first genomics company. And in that around that time, the Human Genome Project was just getting completed. It sounded fascinating. It sounded intriguing, and I was very young. And therefore, I think part of all those pieces and the fact that taking risks and other things is in my DNA. I think we took the leap and started my first company. So that was called Ossimum Bio.
Okay.
And Ossimum Bio was got me back to India at that point. And we started this company. We were doing more things like, what at that point was called bioinformatics, right? So we were putting these pieces together. We started building software for the rest of the world. So it was not so much for India, but mostly for the rest of the world. And build lab information systems. And then around 2005 came an interesting opportunity where we were faced with the situation that you could acquire companies. And so began our acquisition journey. So we acquired a company in Germany, then in the Netherlands, and then finally in the US. And we became one of the largest genomic services players worldwide. We had software products, we had databases, and we had a lot of services where at the time when the FDA was going through this whole process of understanding the genomic insights that are there to understand why certain drugs work for a certain population or not, we were helping in doing some of these trials, right? So that was called the voluntary genomic data submissions.
Okay.
So that was a little bit of where we started from. But what was really bothering me was that anytime I had a conversation with anybody, they said, you do interesting things. And I think that was about it, right? Like, they really didn't understand how it could affect them as individuals. And so I think I thought that maybe there was an opportunity to bring this technology to consumers and to clinicians. Because I think clinicians are also not taught about genomics or bioinformatics or any of this stuff. Neither do consumers understand the value of things like this, right? So for me, that was very interesting that if I could bring this in a simple form to the end user, the consumer, that would be very helpful, right? But there was no one who had done that in India before. So I think that was the start of bringing consumer genomics to India and bringing like wellness genomics, right? Because for most people, it was when you talk about genetics, it was one of two things in 2012-13. It was either to understand who the father of the child was, or it was to understand a disease, right? So to understand a particular disorder like a thalassemia or a cystic fibrosis and so on.
Okay.
Which are very important parts of what you can do. But you didn't use it to understand that, will I have a risk for diabetes or will I have a risk for something? And what can I do to not get it, right? So I think that is what we introduced in 2013. And it was not clearly, not easy, but I don't like easy. So I think that's how we got started. And 2013 was when we started Mapmygenome. The price point of the first product that we launched, just Genome Patri, was quite high, right? It was about 25,000 rupees at that
Okay.
point of time. But that's because the cost of the reagents was really high. You had to spend so much time and energy even educating the first few people as well, right? So
True.
that is what we started with. So Genome Patri became the first product, and we called it Genome Patri because there was nothing that the consumer could latch on to at that point of time, right? Like, how do you get someone to understand what you're selling if they have no clue what it does for them? So we said, people understand what a Janam Patri is, and therefore we called it a Genome Patri, because the Janam Patri does the same thing, right? Like, it helps you to understand health, who you should marry, and all of that. And Genome Patri was doing the same thing, but we're doing it based on your ACTGs and your genetic code, rather than doing it based on, the stars, right?
Yeah.
So that is how we started. Today we've come a long way. We've been able to really create the demand for the genomics products from a wellness perspective, and the whole science has also evolved. There's a lot of changes that have happened. I think more than any other field. I think the field of genomics, wellness, and longevity is really sparked a lot of conversations. I think now anybody you meet knows, has heard about longevity. They've heard about some of these scientists who are these influencers and all that. So it's come a long way. But there is a second part of what our story that evolved, which was more towards the clinical aspects of it, right? How do you get clinicians to use this product? And so now you're starting to see that there really is a, that whole haziness of consumer versus clinicians that's actually coming closer together. So clinicians want what consumers have, and vice versa, right? So there is, ultimately, I think that will result in better education for everybody, and hopefully better health and wellness for everyone.
Thank you for sharing that. And I really like this analogy of, having your birth chart. And this is also quite crucial to have your genetic chart, right?
Correct.
So I think that was like one of the trailblazer way of entering the market and making the consumers understand what you're trying to do and helping them understand their genetic profile. So thank you for sharing that. Like, it's a truly inspiring journey. So at Mapmygenome, so how is AI being leveraged at your company, and what kind of betterment has it created in your product offerings?
So if you think about the human genome, right, like everybody has been using some form of an AI, like machine learning or otherwise, because it's just not possible to look at 3.2 billion base pairs or any. So when you look at an individual, like a whole genome data, that will be 90 GB of data. Right?
Okay.
So you have to use techniques to be able to understand that data, right? So sifting through that data and all that. So we've always used machine learning in our, in our analysis.
Okay.
But it wasn't so much on what today people connect with on the conversational AI, right? So that was always being used. You always use it to be able to understand it from sifting through the data, whether it is 90 GB of data or it is 6 GB of data for an exome or a smaller data set that is there. So some part of it was always being used right from 2000, 2001.
Okay.
It went on, it got better and better. But where we are now seeing this whole thing explode is, how do you simplify this and get data from multiple sources at the same time, right? How do you make it easy for the end user? How do you make it easy for clinicians? How do you make it easy to be able to explain it to the end, to the final, like wherever it needs to be done? And you can do it in real time. And I think that's the difference that we are seeing now, that, it was always there. It was in the back, and now it's coming in the front. So I think that's what we are seeing in terms of what's going on with AI. We are seeing that, we are using AI in pretty much everything, right? Like whether it's a search, whether it's anything else. So I think that is that synthesis of the scientific knowledge with clinicians' knowledge, with all of these other pieces, are now being able to come to a point where you can say, how will it help you? And how will it help us as a company? And how will it help you as a consumer? So I think that's the difference that we are seeing, that over the last 10 years, we can see that change that has arrived. And we are using it in many different ways, right? We are using it to create a resource for people. We are using it to synthesize better results. But it's not to say that you don't just, some people also get confused when you say you use AI, that are you using a chat GPT to give me a result? And we tell them, no, that's not true, right? You're using real data, your own data. You're using data sets to compare it with. But what we are using AI for is connecting the dots, right? You don't use it to say what disease propensity you have, because that's actually based on your actual genetic code, right? So you take a saliva sample, you're analyzing the DNA, you get the information, and you create, right, using machine learning and all of that, you're getting predictions in terms of what you're likely to be predisposed to and so on. But health is not a on-off. It's not a 0-1 switch, right? And
there's a gray area always.
There are many pieces to it. There are many components to your health, right? So, for instance, you might be having the perfect genes, but let's say you don't sleep at all, like you sleep 3 hours, or you are not exercising at all, or you're eating like fried food at night, you're drinking a lot of alcohol, or you're smoking. That will still have a negative effect on your health, right? So there are many pieces to health. And I think that's where putting multiple pieces together is where AI comes the most handy, because you can't technically connect these dots saying, experienced doctor can say that, maybe you should be doing that, but most of the time you're not getting that information from your, you're not telling that to your doctor, right? So now with the advent of a lot of the wearables, with more ways of being able to connect your CGMs, your blood pressure monitors, and your activity measures and all that, you have so many parameters of health. And that's where the real value comes, right? How do you simplify that journey for an end user? How do you make it easy for them to understand that, okay, what do I do next, right? Not everybody is going to understand that, okay, you have a predisposition, you're on your 21st chromosome at this location and that. People don't care about that, right? While it is very important to get a test, I think for a consumer it is more important to say, okay, what should I do, right? And I think that's where you understand the value of why AI is necessary for synthesizing this data, why AI might be very helpful in interpreting this data for the end user at any point of time, right? And that's what is there. But none of this can happen without actually going through quality control, without actually having a human in the loop, because we are still evolving this science. So it is not going to happen that suddenly you go to ChatGPT, you get all your answers. It doesn't work like that, because you are you. Somebody else is like, what works for you might not work for me. And therefore, it's important to put these pieces together.
True. And also, as you've shared, there are so many parameters to measure your health today with respect to lifestyle, with respect to genetic predisposition. So it can sometimes send this flurry of fears into the population. But actually using AI to give proper actionable insights is so crucial, so that, they are not fearful, but they are prepared for any sort of preventive measures that they'll have to take. Going a bit further, now I understand that genomics is very complex. Like, you really need advanced tools to analyze the genomic data. So how is AI changing this part? Is it accelerating the product, the report making, or so on and so forth?
So I'll give you what we do for our most advanced users, right? For them, we have an app, right? The app will measure your regular things like your activity, your, how much time you spent in sunlight, how many hours are you fasting, and other pieces of whatever you can get from your Apple Health, your Google Health, or whatever, right? So that's the basic thing. We are then, based on some of that, we are able to say, if you are today, let's say 30 years old, I'm just giving an example, right? What is that giving you from a, based on whatever you're doing, is there an age that is there right now, right? Like, So if you are a particular age, what is your current age based on just activity and steps? Then we are saying we will input your genomic data in it, your genome padri in it, for instance. And as you upload your genetic data, it helps you to make this better, right? It helps you to make it a little bit more precise, because it says that if you have put in this information, it shows that where you're predisposed to, and therefore you are able to get a little bit more precise. So it might say, maybe you're 30, but your current age might be around 28, or I'm just making this up, right? And then you add parameters like you add your microbiome data, you add your blood data, and you then add your epigenetics data. And I'll explain these pieces together. But when you add all of this, ultimately it'll say, these are the things that, this is now decreasing your age or increasing your age, right? So consumers understand that, right? It's easy when you see your cardiovascular age is increasing, decreasing, or otherwise. While it might not be the most 100% precise, it'll be based on whatever data you have uploaded. So your blood data, for instance, you're looking at your HbA1c and a few other things. And while we can help consumers understand what kind of tests are likely to be correct for them based on their genetic profile and based on what their family history is, whatever they are uploading can be used to in the AI model to sort of come up with the next steps, right? So it simplifies the process and tells them that what is going on with their aging, right? And aging is something people understand. They might not understand that, okay, you have a risk for, let's say, Crohn's disease or something else, but they definitely want to be young. And therefore, we call it like a biohacking package or something, where people can understand, put all these parameters and get a very nice, simple way of saying, what do you need to do next? And all of that is using AI, right?
Yeah.
You're using genetics is basically what you're born with, right? So the day you're born, you have what your parents gave you, right? That you can't change. So that's like a base level thing. So we can understand, are you likely to live longer or lesser than average based on your genetic profile? And I'll go to one of the studies we did recently on longevity, right?
Okay.
But let's say we have that. So that's something that's not changing. Then you've heard about the gut microbiome, right? So the gut microbiome, you're sequencing millions and millions of, all the bacteria and viruses and all that are there. That also uses AI, right? Because you're using data that's coming from lots of sources and information that is there. So, but that changes depending on the food you're eating, depending on all of your lifestyle measures, you see that change. Then there is the epigenetics, which is the effect of your lifestyle on your genome. And it doesn't change your base level code that I talked about, but what it does is it adds some marks to it, right?
Okay.
So I like to say that it's more like a dimmer switch, right? So if you come into some rooms, the switch, this thing is turned on, and you can increase the intensity, you can decrease the intensity.
Yeah.
Right? So similarly, you can understand if there is likelihood of the genes expressing, how much they are expressing and how less, right? And those are all indicators of how you age and how your disease progresses, like cancer and others. So I think those are the pieces that you're looking at, and these are changing. And I think when you put all these pieces together, and if for an average person, all these pieces might be too complicated, but when you put all of this together in a simple to understand way, that's where you're using a lot of AI to bring these multiple pieces together and being able to show it to the end user in a way that is easy to understand. And I think that's the biggest power of AI, I think, that you can get, where you can take all these variables that affect your health, and maybe we don't know everything yet, right? Maybe we can't yet put into account, like, pollution and all. In some ways it does show, but we have not fully understood everything yet.
Yeah.
So things will get even more better over the next 5 years. But I think today we have the ability to take all these data points and put them in a way that is easy to understand. But that's what we do for our most advanced users. For others, I think at least they understand their base level information, and we do counseling for them to say what next needs to be done.
Okay.
I think
So-
I gave you too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of like wealth of information in what you've shared. Like my follow-up question to this. So right now, personalized healthcare is taking over everyone. Like everyone wants that personalized plan, health plan, wellness plan. And AI seems to have a lot of power that it can unlock here. And I see Mapmygenome is also doing a lot in giving personalized healthcare plans and wellness plans based on different tests that you're doing. So can you share more about this?
So personalized healthcare could mean multiple things, right? I think the most common use of that is for the medicines, right?
Yeah.
Which medicine is likely to work for you or not work for you? Should the doctor prescribe a particular dose, not prescribe a particular dose, and so on.
Okay.
So that's one area where, let's say, you are, at that point where you want to, let's say, start taking blood pressure medicine or any other medication that you're taking. Could be some heart-related drugs, or it could be any other, could be mental health, could be anything that is there, or even infections, whatever. So there are multiple of those, right? So what you can now do based on, you remember I told you about what we were doing to help the FDA guidelines to sort of do those clinical trials and all. Now that has become quite clear, right? So what the FDA as well as CPIC, which is another consortium, has published is a set of guidelines for people to understand that if you have this particular genetic variant or an allele that they call it, then what should your dosage for that drug be?
Okay.
Right. So, so we created a product called Medicamap, where we're saying we'll look at all the 165 drugs that the FDA is saying and the CPIC guidelines are saying, and then tell how do doctors interpret this to personalize your medicine. Right. So basically, we are saying that we can take your genetic information. We can look at those variants, and based on those variants, we can help doctors understand if standard dosage works for you. And if standard dosage works for you, then it will show in green. If it is orange or red, then we'll give details in terms of what is that reference that we are talking about, and how does that influence your dosage information.
Okay.
Right? So that is one very clear understanding of what do you do with personalized medicine. That you are really personalizing your medicines and regimens, but at the same time want to make sure that people understand that even that is not just about genetics, right? There's genetics, there is your food, there is lifestyle, there is drug interaction. So please don't do it at home. Like, don't just prescribe yourself drugs, but it's more a tool to help make it part of your health record that helps you understand what should you then, what should your doctor then prescribe to you, right? So understanding genetics is a very important piece of it, but there might be other variables that the doctor will best be able to understand. Hopefully in the future, we'll be able to, like we are doing with wellness, I think all these pieces can come together. If there is real life, like, data that can be integrated into this, and therefore you're able to, those predictions can become clearer for the end user. But for right now, I would say that leave it to your, doctors to do that, because we all don't understand it as much as we think we do, even with ChatGPT. So
true.
I think that's something that people need to do. So that's one piece of that. The second thing is, we were talking about biohacking or longevity and all of that.
And that's the trend for a lot of consumers today, that they want to biohack.
Correct.
So
the first thing that I was telling you about, which is for the advanced users, is essentially to help them to biohack. Right? And that will help you with the counseling that we do. We help them understand what kind of supplements they need to take. Right?
Okay.
We help them understand what sort of, how can they tweak their exercise regimens, how can they tweak their food, and so on.
And these would not require doctor prescription or recommendation as much, probably.
Correct. So but there are functional medicine doctors.
Okay.
And they are the ones who can help you through this process, right?
Okay.
So we do have genetic counselors and a functional medicine doctor that consults you to help you understand that.
Okay.
Because while a lot can be done with AI and with science and all that, I think there's still a lot of unknowns, it's important to have an expert to sort of guide you through that process, right? So that's those are the kind of, I think, a growing set of functional medicine experts who are basically looking at you as you, right? Not just as a disease or as a particular problem, right? And therefore, I think India has had a tradition of Ayurveda, which is basically looking at your overall self as being very personalized.
Yeah.
But I think now functional medicine is taking science into being more personalized, making it available for an individual. So what we do with genomics and data points and helping them understand is very important, but it's also important to make sure that somebody is there to guide you to the next steps.
Makes sense. And I think one more thing I realized when you were talking about personalized healthcare is a lot of times when medications are prescribed to us, there are a lot of side effects that can come up, right? And when you already know your predisposition to a specific drug delivery or response of your cells, then probably the doctors can tweak the kind of medication on the first prescription or first recommendation itself before doing a iteration of that prescription, right? So I think that's amazing.
So I gave a talk at the National Conference of the Indian Psychiatric Association.
Okay.
Now with psychiatric drugs, it takes a long time to even understand if it's working or not, right?
Yeah.
So many times doctors have to do trial and errors because based on their genetic profile, it might work, might not work. And it's not so obvious. You can't just, suddenly do a blood test and understand that.
Yeah.
So this is where it is seeing also a great use case where you can use this information to adjust dosages, to change the medicines, to understand if there are side effects and so on. And all these pieces are now coming together. The clinicians are really enjoying this fact that there is now information that helps them to make
much more better recommendations.
Recommendations for their clients, because I think if you give the right drug, then the chances of them sticking on will be much higher, right? So I think that's what we are seeing, that it's no longer about how much drugs you can give, but if you can do the right thing for your patient, then they're likely to be your patients for the rest of their lives rather than go from doctor to doctor.
True.
So that's one thing that I've seen, that now a lot of clinicians are taking to personalized healthcare. And it's all something now that I think in the future will become part of any baby's personal record, right? And then it becomes helpful to say, if you're suddenly in an ICU for whatever reason, you know what might work for you, not work for you.
True.
If you are getting prescribed any new drug, you're able to figure out what is going on and not going on.
Yeah, and also drastically reducing the treatment curve for a patient. Makes sense. So are you also exploring rare disease detection at Mapmygenome?
Okay, so we have two divisions in Mapmygenome.
Okay.
I think so far we've talked about is the consumer, mostly the consumer facing, except the medicines piece. So that is one part that we do. Then we have Mapmygenome Diagnostics, which is the CAP accredited, NABL accredited lab where we are doing clinical diagnosis. Right?
Okay.
And here you are basically, for all of these, you need a doctor prescription to get started on what they want. So we have 4 divisions in that. There's OncoMap, which is oncology, Baby Map, which is more mother and child. Then we have Rare Map, which is for rare diseases, and Body Map, which is everything else.
Okay.
Right. Now, in pretty much every specialty, the doctors need some sort of a diagnosis or help in terms of understanding what is causing that problem. A lot of times, symptoms might be very similar. You might find, people many times they go to ChatGPT or Gemini or wherever they are going to. And earlier it used to be Google Baba, but now you're going to many of these things.
Yeah.
And you sort of, many people are trying to self-diagnose, right? Now, the reality is many symptoms are similar. And it's and especially for rare diseases, I think it's even more, complicated to understand. And understanding the genetic basis helps a lot, right? It helps a lot in terms of understanding the root cause of the problem. It also helps clinicians guide their patients in terms of next pregnancies and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what you're doing with rare diseases. And rare diseases, as the term says, are rare. And sometimes you might just have 10 patients across the world, right? How do you find that information? So over the last 20 years, since we have been involved with this, we were involved with a lot of these rare disease groups. In fact, we used to bank a lot of samples in my previous company for rare diseases in the US with a group. And all of this, you can realize that they were formed around communities, right? So there are many communities that look at specific areas, not the common rare diseases like thalassemia, cystic fibrosis and all. Those have become part of the fabric of how you look at rare disease. But there are many where, like I mentioned, can be as rare as like 10 patients all over the world.
Yeah, like one in a million.
One in a million. How do you actually come up with not only understand the root cause, but also understand treatment options and things like that, right? So one is that there are communities across, but how do you get all this information, right? How do you find your community? I think that's an important piece. But let's assume that all of that data goes into, a resource. Getting that information to now, say, translate it from there to the scientific world, to the clinical world, I think is very important, right? So with AI, I think many of pulling that information has become easier. You are also able to connect more communities together. And I think if you look at an overall world in the future where maybe data is federated well, that people can actually put in that information, I think we'll be able to see a much more better way of saying how do you understand the root cause of problem, but also understand how do you find those groups that can actually find treatments for you. Yeah. So I think that's an example of where AI can really help in making the world a smaller place to find that communities and people that you want to.
Is there like a case study that you can share with us, probably in rare disease detection, that probably through AI, where AI has played a critical role in uncovering this rare disease at Mapmygenome?
So I think we often use some information that is collected through AI. But in the end, I think finding those communities and all that, currently there are few areas that are there.
Okay.
That part, I think there needs to be a little more development in terms of saying how do you get everybody to follow similar standards, which is a very tough thing to do.
Okay.
But I think as the data gets more federated, we get all these sources, like the Indian Genome Project just got completed, right? You have these 10,000 genomes that just got completed by the government. And that's I think the first big study of its kind that is there. That data should be made available to the rest of the research community, as well as the clinical community. Now for us, I think mostly when a doctor writes a prescription, then you are helping them understand the root cause of a particular problem. So we've had many such cases where a rare disease variant will be there. So in some cases, there might be availability of this in a guideline, in the form of a guideline, which is easy to understand, right? But in some cases, you might not find that, right? Okay. Because it's still very new, but the family of that patient still wants the answers. The clinician wants the answers. I think that's where you have to use, you have to understand where these papers are published. Can you find those papers, and can you rate these papers in a way that gives confidence to the clinician, right? So you can then give what we call as, in those terms, it's called like VUS, or variant of unknown significance. Okay. How do you weigh that, right? How do you give that to a clinician who really wants it, even if it's not part of a guideline? So I think some of it is that, but I think there is more work to be done on rare diseases. And I think given it's, even though they're small, they add up to quite a big number. And therefore, I think there's more research needed to be able to say, how do you use, everyone? So there are many projects that do million projects, so million genomes here. We have some here. The UK there's a UK biobank, and we've used that, for instance, to understand some of those data sets and be able to train those data sets to get there.
Okay.
But I think there is still more work to be done on the rare disease front, at least, because how do you give confidence to people using AI that, what is not yet a guideline can become, but maybe AI can be used to create those guidelines in the first place.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm hoping the research will head towards.
So Mapmygenome started with the initial product Genome Patri, and now I think Mapmybiome is also one of the products. So how have you used AI to expand these offerings or accelerate more innovative offerings at Mapmygenome?
So Mapmybiome is a gut microbiome test, right?
Okay.
So that is more to help in understanding what kind of bacteria they're there. Now, over the last 10 years, a lot has changed in that, right? So earlier you could get information that you have these bacteria, you could get some information on your disease risk, but today you can get information on your moods, you can get information on the neurotransmitters, you can get information on depression, you can get information on diabetes and so on. All that has happened because you had many data points and you put those pieces together and you got it. So some of it we do, some of it is done by other researchers, but they're all using machine learning and others to be able to get that. Now, the way you're doing this is that you're measuring actually bacteria, right? Now, you're measuring bacteria. How do you get from there to understanding if you have depression? Is to look at the set of bacteria that you have and then be able to say, for people with depression, these are the kinds of things that you're getting. So you're sequencing the bacteria and viruses, and you're then taking that information and putting it into what you can finally use as a consumer, right? So now you get all this information, and that's something that is changing. You're based on your food and based on your lifestyle and stress and sleep, things change, right? And then you have epigenetics, which I said, that is your Mapmygenome, where we are giving you biological aging, but you're also giving aging of your different lungs and brain and heart and all that. So you might be, for instance, and that uses a lot of AI, where you're saying, you're looking at, I'm 53 right now. What is my biological age, right? So if it's at 50, then is my heart aging the same way as my lung, as my, bones and various other things? It gives you an understanding and peek into what has actually happened with your body. Right?
Okay.
So it'll tell you that maybe your brain is still young, but your heart is there. So you can now focus on those areas.
Okay.
So I think that's an important thing that we do. But the piece where we are putting all this together, that is called gbio.me. Right?
Okay.
So that is gbiome, we call it. I think, which is basically saying, can you use genetic markers? Can you use biological markers like your blood and other pieces to be able to then come up with an overall health score? And that's what we are doing to piece all this information together. So you might have many variables. Your genetics is going to be the constant one. Your gender, your age of course keeps increasing, and not the other way around, right? So those things are things that are there, right? That's part of intrinsic information that you have. But everything else can change, and that's why we said, how do you piece these things together to create what we call as the gbiome?
Okay.
And the gbiome is more about genetics, your biomarkers, your sleep. I mentioned in the beginning that you have sunlight, so all these understanding of what helps you to stay younger, and how to use that information to create an easier to understand for the end user. That's what we are piecing these together and creating what we call as the gbiome.
Okay. And are there any new products in the pipeline at Mapmygenome that are driven by AI right now?
No, so this is basically this is fully AI driven, right? Like you.
And this product is
GBio.
GBio. Okay.
So currently, as I mentioned in the beginning, that we have this biohacking package that also uses AI, where we are piecing this information together. But it is for advanced users. It's currently not yet something that everybody does, but eventually I think that will become more standard and more available to people.
Okay.
The other thing that we have done is we realized that we wanted to simplify things for clinicians, simplify things for consumers. So we created a whole resource called learn at learn.mapmygenome.in. there, I think you can basically we're using that resource to be able to create a learning interface for consumers or anyone else. So if you have any doubt on anything, you can basically type it in and get that answer.
Yeah, I've actually explored this. So, because we are becoming so educational today, we want to know everything that's going on with respect to our health. So, I think there was a gene map, there is a microbiome map, which actually details into, for example, there's a specific genome, then what impact does it have on your DNA and everything. So, that's actually very insightful.
Yeah, so now a lot of, we found initially that earlier doctors would just write a particular gene, right? And sometimes they were trying to understand if there are other genes that were implicated as well.
Yeah.
So for instance, if you're looking at a neurological problem, we've classified it such that people can just go and say, I look at all the neuro genes, or I look at all the psychiatric genes, or I look at all the cardiac genes, or I look at that, and then dive deeper into it. So it becomes easier for anyone to sort of access that information. And I think we want to be able to constantly update this based on any changes that are happening, across the world, right? If there's a change in guideline, if there's a change in classification of that or anything else, we want to simplify it and make it available for anyone to be able to access that. Because knowledge, I think, is best when it is open.
True, true. Just to follow up on that, now genetic counseling is so critical because when you give an individual their genetic report, it's also important to make them understand what is happening with the genetic profile that we have presented to them. So, how do you go about genetic counseling, and has AI played any role in helping you do a better job at genetic counseling?
So there are two types of genetic counseling we do. One is with the preventive or the wellness side, and here typically these people are healthy, right? They're not people who have a disease, but they have a family history. They have, they might be on some medicines or not, but more or less healthy. They're not someone who's in the hospital or trying to find a solution to a problem. So here you need a different kind of genetic counseling. It's more like somebody who's your health coach in some form, right? So they help you uncover what your genetic report says, but also emotionally support them or nudge them towards the right things in life, right? So how do you get them to start doing something now versus wait for a problem to occur and things like that. So it's a combination of helping them understand what is a genetic variant, what does this mean, when you say you have a high risk, what does it mean, but what should you do now, right? And I think that's an important piece to say, how do you get a consumer to understand, fine, you have a risk for diabetes. Many times when they talk to the genetic counselor, they understand that, yes, my uncle, my aunt, my grandfather, or somebody had that, and that whole history comes out well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very, very important part, because when you look at personalized medicine, it's very important for you to understand what happened in your historical sense,
the ancestry.
Right? And so while Genome Patri helps in finding out where you likely could have happened, what could have happened, I think what counseling does is it helps in getting that information and making it more crystallized, right? And to nudge these people to go to the next step of their health journey. Where AI can help is, and we are building that right now, is to be able to say, fine, I did my genetic test, I got my counseling, they gave me a set of recommendations, where we also use AI to give them the final set of recommendations. But it is guided by a human being, right? Like, it is very clear that a human being has to be involved in that. But tomorrow you might again have a doubt, right? You suddenly remember that, they told me something, but what should I do now? Is there a latest recommendation that is there? So we are working on something where you can get that information on your phone anytime you want. And that's, I think, where you can use like a chatbot to help in terms of understanding that. But I think that we are not yet at that complete advanced stage where you don't have genetic counselors or you don't have doctors and you do all these things on your own. I think it is more like secondary help, right? How do you, once you've got that initial thrust, you've got that first set of guidance from a genetic counselor, how do you then keep up with that knowledge? And how do you use that? Or you are curious about genetics. You don't know what is there. Right? So right now, either you come to us, we have someone who can help you understand that. But maybe you want at 12 in the night or 2 in the morning or wherever, then you want to make sure that there's someone available to help you.
Yeah, that's where technology
That's
can
where
help.
technology can do a better job, right? But you have to feed in that information that is, all the data sets that are really relevant. Otherwise, you're going to get, garbage in is equal to garbage out.
Yeah, makes sense. So one of the recent advancements that we've seen where OpenAI has partnered with Retro Biosciences to advance longevity science. And I think what they're doing is using AI to optimize Yamanaka factors. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
Yamanaka factors to convert a mature cell in human body and transform it to a stem cell, which can then be used for some sort of stem cell therapy or organ regeneration and so on and so forth. So many applications to it. So what are your views on this, and what do you think this new breakthrough is going to unlock in terms of various possibilities in genomics, in healthcare?
So I think, they're all great ways of advancing science.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think people shouldn't get confused that any research necessarily means something they can use it right away. Right? So there is still a lot more work that needs to be done. But I think if we don't do it now, we'll not get to a point where we can use it for an average person at any time. So a lot of people, I think today we find that there are some very courageous human beings who are doing things that normal people won't do.
Yeah.
Right? Which is fine. And they also have the money to do it. So there are people who spend $2 million and others, whether it's like a Brian Johnson or otherwise, which are all, great things to do for science.
Yeah.
But if you want to make it for the average user, I think we'll have to wait to see when it can be available, but also how inexpensive it can get. Right?
True.
So the reality with anything is that you need to make it accessible, you need to make it affordable, and you need to make it credible from a science point of view. And few people will do it in the beginning, and when we need those innovators and we need those pioneers. But I think if I have to, use that information today, I think will be used more as a nice to have feature rather than something that everyone can use. But using AI, OpenAI to unlock that will become very helpful because you can now get that information on your fingertips. And how we use it is ultimately based on what clinicians, what consumers, what scientists want to use it for.
Yeah, like what demand comes out of this innovation. True. Now, healthcare landscape is rapidly evolving because of all the technological advancements, right? So what is your advice to young innovators and startup founders in healthcare domain, and how can they make sure that healthcare is more accessible and effective to population in our country in specific?
So healthcare is not an easy area. I think you just want to make it clear that it takes a long time to get anywhere. So I think you should be truly interested in that space, because if you are not, there isn't that much capital that comes in yet in this space, even though it's something that affects all of us. And therefore, make sure that it's something that you're truly, truly interested in, and that you have an ability to be able to solve a problem with technology. And in the end, I think if the science is catching up, the clinical world is catching up. So there will be a point where it becomes something that everyone wants to do. But remember that there might be 5 other people thinking the same thing as you today. For instance, right now, I think there are about many groups that are thinking about longevity, right? But will all of them succeed? Maybe not. So you have to realize that there are many areas of science that need a lot of innovation in this space. And we need people who need founders who can do that, but make sure that it's something that you truly passionately believe and get the right team together to be able to do that.
Thank you so much, Anu, for sharing so many insights into genomic-based healthcare and a lot of innovation that we can unravel going forward with AI in healthcare. And it was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.